Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to the latest NIBA webinar, second, I think, for the year, and delighted to have such an awesome group of people to unpack NIBA's latest research. Before we kick off, I'd just like to do an acknowledgement of country, and I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. Folks, just setting the scene and framing this discussion, the NIBA board last year, following the broader strategic focus on being the voice of the broking community, undertook a bunch of research. And what we wanted to understand much more fully is what are some of the emerging and current themes facing into the broking community. And the first bit of research, we did exactly that. Looked at broking into the next 10 years, key 8 issues, the preparation and readiness for people and for broking businesses, and totally commend that as a bit of a read. The second bit of research, which we have just launched, which is called Complexity to Clarity, is really unpacking and trying to understand where consumers who use brokers are, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they like, what they value, what they don't like. And I'm really delighted because when I saw the first cut of this data, it was eye-openingly strong, eye-openingly valuable, and evidence that the role the brokers play in the market with their clients, particularly small, medium, large, and very large businesses, is absolutely critical. And this research evidences that. So today's conversation is really unpacking the broker advantage, which is the complexity to clarity conversation. Delighted to be joined today by Alana Devitt from Core Data, our research partner, Kate Gree from Goldsworthy General Insurance Services. Kate also was the Queensland Broker of the Year last year, and together with the other finalists and winners, had an absolute amazing Broker of the Year experience on country in Victoria. We might talk a bit about that. And delighted, of course, to welcome Andrew Borden, General Manager Ops at Insurance AdvisorNet, our commercial partner on this project, and an organisation that's very focused on very similar issues as this research. In terms of how we're going to run today, I'm going to hand over in just a moment to Alana. She's going to give us the highlights of the research. Towards the end of the program, we'll share the link to the document. It's all there in black and white, and commend the read. But in 15 minutes, we'll then come back with Kate, Andrew, and Alana and have a bit of a discussion in terms of some of the insights, some of the things that these folks are seeing. Opportunity for the audience to get involved. We're going to have a couple of poll questions. So between now and 4 o'clock, we're in for a treat. And to start us, Alana, very warm welcome, and over to you for a bit of an insight on the research.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you very much for joining us today on what is a slightly rainy afternoon in Sydney. But ultimately, as Richard mentioned, this is sort of the second report in a suite of research that we have done with NIBA, and it's been fantastic success so far. But before we kind of look into the findings, which will sort of take us through the next sort of 10-15 minutes, I want to set the scene on, how this research was ultimately conducted, because it's pretty critical for a group like this. So we've surveyed sort of 409 small to medium to large businesses. So that's decision makers, business owners right across Australia. So people who are currently using a broker or have used one in the past. That's really what this sample is conducted of. And we kind of did this sort of late 2025, September going into October time. And the sample is pretty representative of this cohort across Australia, because we've got a cohort across multiple sectors across Australia. It does skew slightly male, which is what we expect, and what we usually see as well. So at Cordata, we talked to this group quite a bit. We talked to small to medium business owners for numerous different sectors. But what I find quite interesting is really with this group, you have to be really critical with the way we speak to them, the way we design the research, because we know that they are often much more skeptical. They are not quick to trust. They're not quick to give high satisfaction scores either, which is why it is really critical when we take that view of these findings, just how imperative they are. It gives us this really sharp current view of what clients value, what they trust, and sort of what they expect going forward. So ultimately, what did we find? So we have these 6 dimensions of the broker advantage. Um, so the research clearly identifies these 6 clear dimensions through which what brokers give measurable value. And together these form what we call the broker advantage. So it's pretty important. These are sort of the highlighted real static figures that came out of the research. So ultimately the first bucket we have here is strategic advice saves time. So clients reported saving an average of 20 business hours by using a broker, which is super critical and a super good result because we know just how time poor this group are. The next bucket is around enhancing risk management, and we've got 94% enhanced their risk management approach after the back of the advice that they were given by a broker, which is pretty critical because ultimately that is the outcome that we want to achieve. The next bucket there, we've got building trust and confidence. So 84% trust their broker to act in their best interests. And we'll dive into these a little bit more as we go. But this is a huge critical score because trust, we know, is one of those measures that, from a researcher's point of view, really difficult to actually nail down. And when you see the trust scores in conjunction with all the other scores, you can really identify just how much these clients trust their broker and really that part that they are a life partner within the business. And 88% they're saying that they have confidence that their cover is right for their business. The fourth bucket then moving into claims. So we really know how critical that claim time is. It ultimately puts everything the broker has gone through to the test at that point. So, we have 95% of brokers saying that the broker was critical at claim time, 98% saying that their claim was successfully resolved. And kind of within research, we sort of have a rule of thumb when we sort of start getting to those scores around 97, 98, 99, we can pretty much say that that's universal. It's a pretty unanimous score. And the last 2 buckets there around delivering client satisfaction means 87% reporting overall satisfaction with broker services. And then when it comes to improving client outcomes, 91% say brokers help them achieve better business outcomes. So the headline numbers we have across these 6 are ultimately remarkable. They're not marginal numbers by any means. They're pretty transformational. Brokers are ultimately not simply just intermediaries between insurers and business owners. And this research really does confirm that they are trusted advisors who create that real tangible value for Australian businesses. So now I'm going to dive into the dimensions sort of individually one by one. But the first dimension that we have is around that strategic advice saves time. So we do know that time is one of the most precious resources in any business. And navigating that insurance process alone is genuinely so time consuming. And what quite is interesting about it, how our research shows that using a broker does save them that 20 hours, but across the entire process. So you can see there around understanding insurance needs, 3.2, finding and pairing policies, 4.8, completing that paperwork, 2.3, and managing renewals at 2.5. And then we get to supporting claims, which is probably the most intensive stage in terms of time, and that's 7.2 hours saved. So the broker's kind of involvement at both that supporting claims and also the renewal is really, really critical. And even with the managing renewal stage, that's really interesting because when we look at clients who have only just recently gone through a renewal and are currently using a broker, that number actually moves up to 3 hours amount of saved in just that renewal process alone. So It's pretty striking. You've got 90% of our respondents have at some point also handled part of the insurance process by themselves. So they completely understand how much harder it is, and they understand the value that their broker is being in terms of the time that they're saving, reducing that administrative burden. Brokers ultimately freeing up these business owners and decision makers to focus on what actually matters, which is ultimately, growing and running their business. So I love this chart. It's a real identical one of what the value is. But moving into this second dimension there, we've got that enhancing risk management. And this is one of those sort of points within this research that was super interesting, and I thought was quite interesting when we saw it. Sort of beyond that saving times, brokers are ultimately actively strengthening how businesses manage risks. So in the world that we're in right now, it's pretty crazy. We've got all these cyber threats, we've got geopolitical instability, climate events. Identifying risk early is not really optional for business owners. It is essential. And when brokers identify additional risks within a client's business, 89% of clients say they found it helpful and value, and only 3% were concerned it might increase their costs. So it's a pretty powerful signal. We've got clients aren't just tolerating proactive advice, they're ultimately welcoming it and taking it on. When that advice drives action, 76% of current clients who were told about that additional risks went on to purchase additional cover. And then a further 18% made other risk management changes. So when we take that together, we've got 94% of our overall respondents are actively doing something to enhance their risk management as a result of broker involvement. So that really is that broker advantage in action in risk management. It's not just about identifying risk, but translating that into from awareness into actual action. Moving into then dimension 3, which is around building trust and confidence. And as I mentioned earlier, trust is one of those really hard things to measure as a researcher. But when we pair it with the verbatims that we received, and when you pair it with the rest of the headlines that have come from this research, it really gives you a flavor of how much clients trust their brokers. So we've got 84% of current broker clients trusting their broker to act in their best interest. So that's scoring them sort of 8 or more out of 10. And this is typically a group, and I cannot emphasize this much, how much this is said to me around when you say to them, what do you rate? They'll never give it a 10 out of 10 because they're the type of people to say there's no such thing as a 10 out of 10 because there's always room for improvement. But we still have nearly a quarter at 23% ultimately giving their current broker a 10 out of 10 for trust. So it's really something that you typically don't see. But I think it's pretty much covered off here, and kind of the one client that summed it up really beautifully in this kind of long verbatim. But really the critical part in this is around they never tried to sell me something I didn't need or rush me into a decision. When things get tough, they were there with clear answers, no delays, no pressure. It feels like they're part of the team. So almost to me, this is what trust looks in practice. It is being there at those critical moments. So that kind of brings us quite nicely into our fourth one, which is around claims. So claims ultimately, as I said, is that moment of truth. It's when everything the broker has done, that advice, the coverage, the relationships ultimately put to the test. And brokers deliver. We've got half of our respondents you have made an insurance claim in the past 3 years. So it's not, for business owners, it's not often a rare event. It's for many businesses, claims are quite a regular reality. And a lot of that can fall into workers' compensation, motor and fleet insurance. But when claims arose, brokers were deeply involved. We've got 80% of claimants said their broker was actively involved throughout the most recent claim, and only 4% saying their broker wasn't involved at all. Ultimately, it's that sort of that all of that process. So the support is comprehensive. It's helping clients understand what's covered, preparing documentation, liaising with insurers, following up, and it's that end-to-end advocacy. And then we kind of be moving into the next slide. You can really see how those outcomes are really strong. So we've got 98% of claims were ultimately resolved. So again, remembering back to that, that's pretty much nearly universal, as we call it in research. And about 80% of those were actually resolved within a month. So it's really, really interesting. But most compellingly here, we've got 91% of clients whose broker was involved in a claim believe that their broker involvement led to better outcomes. And that's ultimately the difference of where broker makes where it matters most. Into kind of our fifth dimension here around delivering client satisfaction. So when a business works with brokers, they are really satisfied. And there's a simple, powerful message within this dimension in itself. Almost among current users, we've got 87% rate their overall satisfaction an 8 or above out of 10. With a quarter rating them as extremely satisfied, so 10 out of 10. And even among former clients, which is really interesting, satisfaction actually sits at 72%, which is really quite high and tells us that even though they may no longer use a broker at this time, they've really left a positive impression that is pretty enduring. And satisfaction is particularly high during claims. We've got 87% of clients whose broker was involved with a claim being satisfied with the support they received. So nearly 2/3 rating it at the highest levels. And clients consistently describe their brokers as taking on the heavy lifting, handling the complexity side of it so the business can focus on the operations of it. And the language, and you can see it in that verbatim in the top there, is used as it's worth reflecting on. It's things like, the perfect results. They say things like smooth, transparent, easy to understand. Did the job to almost its entirety. So that's what ultimately kind of keeps them coming back. It's that satisfaction. And lastly, we move into our final dimension, which is around improving client outcomes. And this is really what sums up and brings it all together. Perhaps the most powerfully captures the broker advantage in its whole. We've got 91% of clients who use a broker have said that they were involved in the claim and believed it achieved a better outcome. So these aren't just better processes, it's that they are ultimately given better results to Australian businesses. But improving outcomes does go beyond claims. Clients see their brokers as long-term partners, not just transactional providers. And again, this verbatim here is quite lovely. We have more than half strongly agree that their broker reduces the effort and stress of dealing with insurance. 52% strongly agree their broker explains options in a way that's easy to understand. And 47% see their broker as a trusted advisor for their business, someone involved in decisions beyond just that annual renewal. Really kind of the businesses as well, we have to remember that some of these businesses, they work with just one singular broker, and they just value that continuity and trust across the entire relationships. And even we have businesses within this cohort of our sample who've been in business for more than a decade, and they've actually report that their broker has been with them spanning 6 to 10 years. So it's pretty clear evidence that brokers don't just manage insurance. They're improving outcomes, they're building resilience, and becoming ultimately strategic partners in their clients' success. So to kind of wrap up the research, and that's sort of a bit of a whistle-top tour on the entire report, but ultimately, where does this take us? We've got looking ahead kind of into the future. Clients really are anticipating changes in the insurance landscape, and most, well, largely feel prepared for them. It is largely based on their broker, and we've got 79% believe they'll need more strategic advice from brokers in the year ahead. So that last number, in itself, is pretty critical. The demand for broker expertise is not diminishing in any way, shape, or form. It's growing. And brokers are evolving to meet those business needs and combining kind of that expert risk advice, the regulatory knowledge, and genuine client partnership will ultimately define the future of the insurance broking profession.
Alana, that is absolutely awesome whistle-stop tour. Thank you for those insights, and welcome our all-star panel for a bit of a round of grounds unpack from Kate, your perspective, Andrew, your perspective, and Alana, a little more from you. So, folks, I'm going to start with Kate and say welcome, Kate. By design, we're going to invite Kate to introduce herself, and also what's your initial response to this research as Alana's laid it out?
Brief intro on me is I'm a director of Goldsworthy General Insurance Services. My business is at Upper Mount Gravatt in Brisbane. I'm a third generation family business, and fun fact, we're actually 63 years of age today. So my grandfather started the business. My mum and dad were cattle farmers in central Queensland and had a full change of life after we lost my brother to leukemia. Moved down to Brisbane and came into the business. It was financial planning and general insurance, and it was old AMP. Then my sister and I, when we finished school, I went out west working on cattle stations for a bit, and she came into the financial planning industry. We came in and, we're told the first generation makes it, the second builds it, the third loses it, and told why we were never going to be successful in this industry, but we're still around, so that's a good thing. And then we separated the businesses and bought mum and dad out about 5 years ago. And then I'm pretty proud to say my 19-year-old son's just joined the business as an account exec just recently as well. So got the fourth generation starting. Strategic relationships as far as an insurance broker goes. It's funny. I feel like with how the world is changing and how the internet is taking over everything, I think it's more important than ever that we're bringing that humanness into what we do. I feel like it's done the full circle. I remember when my grandfather started, it was all about the relationships, knowing our clients. He would go out and see every single client. I remember my mum door knocking around suburbs because they had the best rates. And we've still got clients today who remember those and the relationships that they created back then. And I think as brokers, that's what's going to hold us apart and give us a future, is making sure that we bring the human element into what we do. We know our clients, we're making sure that we're there for them when they need us. I'm still yet to hear a client say, I paid too much for insurance when they're in a major claim. So, you really see the value of the piece of paper once it hits the fan. And that relationship is clear in what we do. It's making sure that we're upfront and honest with our clients when we make a first contact with them, explaining our values, what our principles are, and knowing our personal mission, vision, values of each business as well. So it's quite clear when you're explaining that to a client. And then obviously the proof's in the pudding. So you're making sure you're speaking to every single renewal. You're treating every client, the same, like you are that strategic partner in their business, in their life, because when they need you, you need to be there for them. So yeah, I think it's that human element.
Okay. In terms of the research findings, was any of that surprising? I mean, to see the level of strength of the data coming through, looking at through the lens of your own business?
I don't think it was surprising. I actually really enjoyed reading it because it kind of backed up my own personal beliefs. I think it was really clear that the people who are using brokers are using them for that human element. AI is never going to be able to go and give you a hug when you're watching your business burn down. So, and AI is never going to be able to sit there and go, okay, we can work through this together. It will be there to a point, but as I said, it's never going to be able to sit there and put an arm around you when you're crying and watching your whole life, feel like it's shatter.
Thanks, Kate. We're going to come back to you with some more on that. But Andrew, perhaps to you, tell us a bit about yourself, but also then, tell us about your first views of the research. Was it surprising? Was it affirming? Over to you.
Yes, so thanks, Richard. Andrew Borden, I'm the General Manager of Operations at Insurance AdvisorNet. So I sit across our regional operations teams as well as some of the other service delivery teams and systems and marketing and learning development, and make sure that we're doing a good job of servicing our network, which is about 200 businesses in Australia, with close to 1,000 people operating across those businesses. And thank you to you and the board for the opportunity for Insurance AdvisorNet to support this research. And I think similar to Kate, it really backed up a lot of our views. We've worked hard to build an active advice-based model in our business. And I think to answer your question about my reaction to the research, I think that probably the first thing I'd say is it's a pretty good scorecard. Like, there's not much in there that you'd look at and say, geez, that's a bit rough, or we've got some work to do. Most of it's pretty glowing, which is a fantastic reflection on the industry. And I think the other thing that sort of jumps out at me is that clients are putting value on a lot more than just price. You know, when you look at the things that they're giving value to across this survey, obviously the claims stood out substantially, but the risk management advice, the awareness of the exposures that they're facing, the ability to go and mitigate those risks or buy additional cover, all of those things were really highlighted by this report. And I think, you know, when brokers are doing their work well, clients get enormous benefit out of that. And I think, you know, what we're seeing is that most brokers are doing things well, and clients really are very satisfied with the work that they're doing.
Yeah. Andrew, I was sitting in your conference room back in, I think, October, November last year. You folks do your own NPS and client satisfaction measurement. Those scores were similarly very, very strong.
Yeah, correct. So we do an NPS survey across all our clients once a year. I couldn't tell you the specific number, but I think it's just north of 80%, 80 flat NPS. If you're familiar with the NPS, that's just a deduction of how many people are rating you 8 and 10s, take away the people that are rating you sub 6, I think, from memory, 9 to 10.
Yes.
So it's a tough score. I was in an insurer's office yesterday and they had this huge green light around their NPS that was just under 10%. It was just under 10. So yeah, an 80% satisfaction rate is obviously fantastic for us, but yeah, really consistent with what we're seeing come out of here.
And I mean, just broadly, and Lana, I'll head to you, but you know, coming up out of the particular practice, but within the sector, you know, it feels like there's a much more mature conversation taking place around clients, who they are, what they need, how to track and measure those kind of things, and it kind of helps either affirm or helps us do better in the places where we might not be doing as well as we should do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think the bar's really lifting in terms of what customers are expecting, and that bar is probably only going to move further up and faster, particularly as people can do a lot of research themselves. What if you know, I think you've heard me tell this story before. If you pretend to be a client and jump online at a large language model and ask it the question, what should I expect of my insurance broker? It's a pretty confronting and long list of services that it will say you should be expecting your broker to talk to you about all of these things. So, you know, that's going to have a really rapid impact on where customer expectations are. And I think the industry is responding to that, and you know, it needs to keep responding to it.
Yeah. Lana, I'll come to you in a moment, but just Kate on that one. I mean, you're frontline with clients every day. Do you see those standards lifting, or those expectations kind of lifting all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are fortunate too. We also run an NPS at the end of every year, and we've been consistently sort of 90% and above. So I think similar to Andrew there, where our relationships with our clients are integral to what we're doing every day, and speaking to them, getting to know them on a personal level. So, yeah, it's coming through with the promises that it's delivering on your promises that you're making. I was also thinking one thing that did stand out with those figures, Alana and Richard, was the age bands. I thought that was really interesting, because I sort of thought people using brokers might have been sort of 30, 35 plus. But there was quite a high percentage between 18 and 29. It was 16% using brokers there as well that answered this research. So, and I was really pleased to see that, because I don't think, I think maybe this younger generation rely a lot on online and what they can learn from that, and don't always value, historical education and what we can do for them, I guess. So I was really pleased to see that.
Fantastic. Alana, just back to you then, just to wrap this client conversation. I mean, you said a couple of times, and you do a lot of research in a lot of sectors, that these numbers were like so positive, and this audience is a pretty hard audience in terms of getting the sort of scores. I mean, did you have to second guess yourself and go, let me just read this again?
Yeah, a few times. When I first got back the numbers, I was like, no, I've not seen, like, we do research like this with this group and kind of within the service space quite a lot at CoreData, and I have not actually seen numbers like this. So I did actually have to take a real good depth of look through the research. But what ultimately backed up so much of those numbers was the verbatims that we got through, like people writing, and people don't typically write really long answers in our surveys, especially this group, but writing these really lovely messages, giving these really clear examples of how their brokers have provided value. And even to Andrew and Kate's point about NPS, like, we run NPS surveys for quite a few sectors within financial services for small to medium business owners. And honestly, the average scores tend to just sit around the 60% mark. Like, that would be considered pretty high. So it's just, again, evidence of how this research is really representative of what is happening in the wider industry. If it backs up and is lining up with wider things like your NPS scores, it just gives that real overall evidence that clients are ultimately very happy with the value that is being provided. And it made me kind of think, it's something that we need to shout about as an industry, because kind of from a wider perspective, if you're not a client using a broker, you probably don't think of a broker with that kind of high level of service scores, which is great. And even also to kind of address Kate's point about the age, I thought that was quite interesting as well in the research. And a lot of that group kind of sat near the sort of 29 age range, but sort of were in their kind of first starting up businesses, a lot of them in that kind of professional services, so the cyberspace as well. So it's really quite interesting they are turning to brokers.
Yeah. Folks, we have introduced this year polling, and we're going to go now to a live poll, interested in what your views are on a range of things. We'll do a couple of polls through this. So the poll question has come up. Which of these areas do you most frequently demonstrate value to your clients in your day-to-day role as a broker? If you can just take a half a mo to give us your initial thoughts, and when the live poll comes through, we'll just unpack it with the panel. Whilst we're doing that, I'm just going to segue straight into the second theme that we wanted to talk about today, and that kind of picks up some of the discussion around the evolving and changing role of broker. In our first bit of research, the theme around, and Alana has spoken to it today already, the role of broker as strategic advisor, much more than just someone who's placing and unpacking the risk landscape, but someone deeply embedded in the business. Andrew, I thought I'd just start with you. Just tell me what you're seeing across your network, and how's that kind of changing and changed over time?
Well, I think so there's probably a few parts to this. Brokers do a lot. Like when brokers are doing their job well, there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. So, from the very start of having a thorough understanding of a client's business, to identifying the exposures that business has, and then educating the client around those exposures and why they are exposures and how they might play out, through to then placing insurance, And I guess there's a lot of expertise that I think a lot of brokers take for granted or underestimate in terms of our knowledge of the vast array of products that are available, but also the real nuance with that is that there is also a vast amount of markets that are offering that. And so that knowledge of, who's got the right appetite, who's got the right service offering, and marrying all of those things together with a client to produce an insurance package that fits them, all of these things, when they're done well, add an enormous amount of value for that client. And I think really we probably need to get better at accepting that we are very specialised in that space, and that specialisation creates a lot of value for our clients, probably more than they think. And we need to be very good at demonstrating that value when we're putting in our advice to that client together, being really clear about all those things that we've brought to the table and making sure that we're demonstrating that value really thoroughly. I think we're doing that more and more, Richard. I think I think that there are. It's still a journey, and there's a spectrum of people in terms of where people sit at. I think at that very transactional end, it's got a limited life in the broking space. And if you went back 10 years ago, there was a whole lot of that very transactional broking, a lot of broking of very simple insurances. Well, a lot of that's left the broking market and gone direct. I think we'll continue to see that erosion in that sort of simple end of insurance. And as we get sort of more focused on that complex end, we have to be very good at demonstrating the professionalism and value that we bring.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Hey, Kate, your take on that topic, and maybe if there's a particular client example, where that a relationship has evolved, and you really sit at the centre of their risk guidance and advice framework.
Yeah, I was going to say, with what we do, we've kind of gone from the point where we arrange insurance for our clients to we improve outcomes for them. We have to know a little bit about so many different things. We have always, my mother and father always said to me, in the event of a claim, there's 5 people who you need to have on speed dial: your bank manager, your accountant, your solicitor, your financial planner, and your insurer. And at the end of the day, out of all of those, there's only one that's really going to give you back money. So it's really important that you have that relationship with your client, but you also need to be thinking about those risks. And it is different for every single occupation, every single client, every single business structure. If you think about those other business professions, accountants go on paperwork, it's black and white. Solicitors go on legal documents. They go on what we've written down and making sure our compliance is up to speed. But at the end of the day, we work in the grey area a lot. So, the more educated you can be on your client's business, the better relationship you can have with them. And I guess it builds their trust up in you. And when they do have a claim, they understand that, number one, if they're not covered, they're aware of that before. Like quite often we have clients, we had a rent default one just recently, and she goes, "I'm ringing you up. I know I'm not insured for this, but I just needed you, to know." And it's like, yeah, but we had that discussion and it's very clear in all of our paperwork. She goes, "Yeah, I know, but I just wanted to let you know, but this is happening." So, it's a lot easier to have the discussions knowing that the client's very aware of what they are and aren't covered for, rather than being caught out in the end. And neither of you have thought about it or had that discussion. So, sorry.
Yeah, just picking up your third generation conversation, do you think the role of broker, if you go back to your granddad and say your parents, do you reckon that's changed over time? Or has it just got a bit more sophisticated because there's flasher tools and computers, but the essence is still the essence?
Well, change is a very constant thing for our industry there, Richard. So, yes, it has changed a lot, but as far as the relationship piece goes, That's always been, number one priority. In all of this documentation, trust is mentioned a lot. And for our business, trust is what our values are based on. And we've defined it as trust, relationships, understanding, service, and teamwork. And when I say those 5 words, that is in every touch point that we have, whether it be with an insurer, whether it be with a client, whether it be with each other here in the business. So I think going right back to 1963, you would have found that that part of it hasn't changed. But yes, everything else in how we do it has changed.
Yeah. Interesting, just quick anecdote. I was in Northern Territory, Darwin last week. NIBA just ran its first event there, and I was in the car with one of our committee leads, just driving to the airport, and I just asked him, I said, so how far do you go to see your clients? He said, well, if I have to drive 600-700 Ks, I'll do that because I want to see the river crossing. I want to see, he obviously does a lot of stuff on farms and cattle stations. I want to see the risk. I want to be able to understand it so that I can better advise them. I don't want to just be on the end of a phone going, tell me about your life. So that kind of sense of being in the moment and being present, not only from a relationship perspective, but also for assessing, understanding the risk, I thought was, that's kind of part of what we do as a sector, right?
Yeah, one of the hardest phone calls that I've ever had to take from a client was about 4 a.m. in the morning. They rang my mobile and he'd just lost his mum, his dad, his aunt, his uncle, and his grandmother in a car accident, a head-on car accident. And we did all of their investment properties, all of their home and contents, their businesses, all of their motor vehicles. And as a result of that, we were able to take or alleviate some of that stress because, it's pretty tough going to a funeral and there's 5 coffins up the front. And this client, he was it. His brother had committed suicide 10 years earlier. So he needed us to walk him through that. And those claims went on for 2 or 3 years. Like that was, he had 3 young children, was dealing with a massive amount of grief, and he needed us every step of the way to help him get through all of that.
I can only imagine. Alana, just I'm going to segue just briefly. It's really part of the same conversation. That's this kind of trust and confidence conversation. You kind of made the point that, you can unpack trust whilst trust is a kind of, it's a value and it lives out there. It's a lot about doing the right thing always and always on, right? That's what the research is telling us.
Yeah, ultimately, and trust is like I said, it's one of those funny ones. You kind of can't take it as a perception on its own, in that just sort of how much do you trust your broker. You have to give it that wider picture, because trust ultimately is not formed really quickly. It's formed in these, little events over a period of time where brokers show up again and again and again for the client. And even for Kate's example there, like, God, I can only imagine just how horrible that must have been for him. But the trust to have someone to have your back like that, ultimately as well in a professional way, is critical. And it's something you can't even measure on numbers so much, but we just take it as sort of the verbatims, and we take it into other satisfaction scores, and also into considering that these business owners are ultimately, when they're answering these questions, comparing it to other services that they might use, whether that is financial planning or my accountant or my lawyer. And I'm, not sure that they're necessarily, their accountant is driving 600, 700 kilometers just to see their farm in that instance. So it's really those things that is just completely explains why the numbers are so high. And in some of the cases in this research, I'm just saying, it's universally that outcome is better once you have a broker.
Andrew, just last one to you on trust and confidence, then we'll just have a look at the poll results. I mean, is this, I imagine it's a fairly regular conversation within the IA community.
It is. And I think the thing with trust is that it is built from some foundations. And I think those foundations, and Alana mentioned one of them, it's time. it's kind of being there over time and building that confidence. It's expertise. It's actually someone will trust someone who knows what they're doing. It's service. It's the little things and getting back to people and answering your phone and all of those things, and value. That people actually see what you do and understand what you bring to the table is worthwhile and worth what they're paying for it. And I think where those things exist, trust forms over time, and it's obviously something that you build slowly. It's very hard to compete against. When you're trying to win a client who's got a trusted relationship with a broker, they are very difficult to shift if possible at all. And I think it's probably our best defense against, Kate mentioned AI and the world changing in that regard, and who knows what that looks like in a few years. I think where we've got, trusted relationships and we're seen as strategic advisors who are like an extension of a business, I think we've got a really healthy future. So brokers that are playing in that space have got a really healthy future.
And I think that's ultimately some of the message, right? Hey, okay, poll results. Saving clients time and simplifying the process, 17%. Providing strategic advice, 13%. Advocating for clients, 40%. And building long-term trust relationships, 30%. So it just shows you where this cohort are seeing the value as they see it in your day-to-day insights with your brokers. Any insights, Kate? Does any of that surprise you, or that's pretty much what you folks do?
No, it's all important. And I think you definitely see the value of a broker during claims. Our feedback that we get internally here that has shown, there's so many examples that I could give you in the survey results. So yeah, it's I think it's really important that clients understand they've got that one touch point in the event of a claim. They're not having to, rehash everything they've gone through just to be able to ring up and get a quick answer. And it's important that you're taking the time to give them updates without them actually having to call you. So it brings in that time piece as well. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I was also going to say, just quickly back to the trust. I think you're seeing it in winning new business as well. More and more you're finding winning new business or creating those relationships to create a new business is taking longer these days because people don't trust easily.
Yeah, exactly. Andrew, any insights or the initial thoughts on that poll result?
I guess just one reflection is that different brokers, different brokerages play in different spaces. And, if you're in a high frequency part of the market, if you're a transport broker, then you're seeing a lot more claims than someone who might be playing in professional lines, for instance. So that will differ depending on the style of business that you're writing. But yeah, I think, as Kate said, I think the hardest thing about this is that you could only pick one answer, and I suspect most people probably had a hard time doing that because all of those things are pretty important.
Nice. Folks, I'm going to go to our second poll, and this is all about skills for the future. See if we can get that up. So which skill will brokers need to develop most to succeed into the future? You can see the 4 options there. If you just take a moment to complete that, would be awesome, and we'll come back and unpack that as well. But perhaps we'll just segue into the next conversation. I might, Alana, go to you first. And this is kind of looking ahead. If we were sitting here, we're sitting in 2026. If we were sitting here in 2030, what do you, and we did this same research into consumers who use brokers, what do you think we're going to be seeing? And what should we be looking out for?
Yeah. We talk a lot about the fact that, AI and technology and regulation is going to affect brokers in the next few years, but it's also going to affect business owners. being a business owner in Australia is becoming more and more complex. While it can be easier with technology and automation, there is this kind of added element of uncertainty in the world. So really for 2030, 2035, clients are going to be really needing to lean on that broker for those strategic advice and that expert knowledge that brokers have, whether that's on their business, but also what's up and coming in the world from a regulation point of view, from new innovative insurance product point of view, because ultimately that's where, the value is, and they're going to need that even more so in the next, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Well, where do you think we'll be in 5 years' time?
Well, first of all, when you said 2030, it took me a second then and gone, oh my God, that's only 4 years away. That's frightening in itself. But I think, we need to be focusing on getting younger people into this industry. It's a really great industry to be in. And they bring a whole new knowledge and skill set of AI and growing up with the internet and change happening at such a dramatic speed. That's all they know. So it's really integral that we are bringing them into the business, and that we are going old school a little bit and showing them, taking them out and getting them in front of clients, getting them to underwriter PD days, taking them to claims, and taking a step back and because AI is going to take over a lot of their in-office roles, and it will be able to, it'll be a great asset for them, but they need to be able to know that their difference is actually the human connection. So,
Yeah. And how's your son going in his new gig, talking about bringing in the next generation? How did that process happen, and kind of how's it going in his first, few months in the role?
yeah, he finished school with a school-based apprenticeship doing boiler making and welding, and that's also a skill that they're really struggling to get kids into. He went there and drove into the car park and saw the other cars there and decided that they didn't drive the types of cars that he wants to drive long term. So he decided that after 6 months of welding little triangles, he needed a little bit more. And he actually did a week of work experience with Atlantis and went out to a heap of different brokerages. And he came in and he goes, "Mum, I've had the best day every single day." And I was looking for a new staff member, and it's not easy to find staff at the moment. And I thought, well, I'll give him a chance. And he wanted to do it. So, his story will be different to so many of ours. He chose this industry. He didn't fall into it. And he's loving. He's absolutely loving it. He's thriving. It's so refreshing because we're very fortunate in that we've got long-term staff here. He asks questions that you just don't think to ask. And we had an underwriter here this morning, and, we speak in abbreviations so much. And, when you are used to doing that, sometimes you do that with clients as well. And so with him, it's kind of making us all go back and take a step back and go, oh, there's actually a lot of importance in us explaining things a little bit further to up and coming staff as well as clients. So no, it's very refreshing.
Fantastic. Well, we wish him well, and not for this bit of research, but there is another bit of research coming which talks about where new entrants are coming in from the business and into the sector, and exactly your story is how many are coming in, aunties and uncles, mums and dads. So yeah, stand by for that conversation.
We've actually had a few friends, Richard, say that they're wanting to join the industry as well. So that's been really nice to hear too.
Happy days. And I'm going to go to you in just a mo, but here we go. Our poll result: strategic risk advisory skills, comms and client engagement, data and analytics, and edging out in first place, navigating increasingly complex risks and coverage. So that's kind of pretty interesting. And the skills conversation, like the entry into the sector conversation, is a conversation we're having big time in both the research work that we're doing with core data, but also at a NIBA board level. And we've established a project called Project Athena, which is all about skills, learning, development, and so on, given the sort of changing nature of where we're at. But anyway, enough of that for the moment. Andrew, over to you. Thumbs up. Thank you, whoever thumbed up. Over to you, Andrew. Your sense of, where are we going to be in 2030? What are you folks thinking about over at Insurance Advisor Net?
Well, firstly, can I just say congrats to Kate, because it's always a good story when someone takes a punt. I know it's your son, but that aside, when someone takes a punt on someone new in the industry, because it is a big time investment, it does distract, but it's incredibly worthwhile and fantastic for our industry. And I get equally excited when I hear the stories of a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old joining the industry and their eyes light up and go, wow, where's this been? And no one told me about it. So that's a great story. They're cute. Look, I don't know if I've got too much to add. I think it's probably a bit of a cliche, but there is the sense that, the rate of change is going to keep getting quicker. So I think some of the trends that we've already talked about around, it's going to get harder to be just a transactional broker. Sending out here's your renewal schedule and your invoice is just not going to cut it. And, I think that's been a kind of gradual thing that's been happening for a while. I think some of those trends will probably speed up, if anything. I think that there'll be a much higher premium for expertise and the ability to talk to clients about a much broader suite of risk management topics than just show me last year's schedule and I'll see if I can get you $100 better. I think that ability to have a strategic risk management conversation is going to be really critical, and clients will expect it. And I think for the brokers that do that well, I think it'll be a pretty healthy industry in 2030. I can't see any reason why it won't be.
Yeah, amazing. Folks, I'm going to wrap and close very briefly, but first things first, thank you to our panel for sharing their insights and their expertise. I think the insights from the research, Alana, to Andrew's last point, really position the sector extremely well. It's always difficult when you get great results. It's pretty easy to sit back and go, it's all going to be great. And I think the challenge for us as a sector is how do we continuing to improve? How do we look in the mirror often and actively? And make sure that, collectively the 14 or 1,000 brokers are out there are reflective of these kind of numbers always on. So I think big thanks to the group for their insights, and feel free to give them emoji virtual claps if you wish to. 2 quick advertorials from NIBA. The first one, which is very related, we're right in the middle of the code feedback session. The code is really a key part of NIBA's commitment to both self-regulation, but also to lifting the bar and ensuring the trust and confidence message goes on and is kind of built into how we operate. So if you haven't had a chance to have a look at it or to give you feedback, please do. And the very quick second advertorial is the NIBA conference just launched called Future Ready. A lot of this stuff that we've been talking about today, a lot of the insights, we will absolutely be sharing into the conference and beyond. We're expecting a fantastic turnout, so look out for more on that. We're going to release a very quick survey at the end of this webinar. Really keen to know what you liked, didn't like, how we can improve, what other topics you're interested in. So appreciate everyone in the audience joining us today and for staying with us. And to the panel one last time, big thanks, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar on a topic of interest. I think we're going to be doing farm. We just produced a piece on insurance and farms and the whole rural piece. So look out for that. That'll be coming after Easter. But for now, at 3:57, have an awesome afternoon, and thanks for joining.